Okay,
Oh, and Pete has joined us. So you have a quorum and a full board.
okay, we have a quorum. Okay, it's still 5:59. I'll wait one more minute.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Okay, I'd like everyone to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I would like to call a moment of silence on behalf of the past volunteers of the Branza 40 Fire Protection District for the last 75 years, who many of them are no longer with us. But they all had a part in the building this station, and this station was built on their backs. Chief Lackey, can you administer the roll call?
Right to Director Vanris.
Pardon me, present.
Director Meyer,
Present.
Director Dodds,
Present.
Director Landon,
Here.
Director O'Connell.
Present.
Okay. All members are present.
Joe Serrano from LAFCO, would you provide a quick overview of the virtual meeting process?
Yes, sir. Good evening, board members, members of the public. As part of this reorganization effort, the Branson 40 board has asked LAFCO to provide admin support, including administering these virtual meetings. And we are utilizing LAFCO's Zoom webinar account. And under this platform, the members of the board and your staff have 100% control of your microphones and webcams. For members of the public, your microphones and webcams have been disabled, but you still have an opportunity to view and hear the entire meeting. You'll also have an opportunity to address the board on any agenda item. You can do so by raising your hand. So if you click on the raise hand icon, we will acknowledge you in the order that we see it. Once you are acknowledged, you'll have up to 3 minutes to address the board on any of the agenda items. I will let you know when you have 1 minute left, and I'll let you know when your time has expired. And as a reminder to the board, any action required tonight requires a roll call vote, and your chief will administer that roll call vote. But again, this is a virtual meeting. We'll do everything we can to ensure that we hear from all members of the public and the board. But this is the structure. And with that, Pat, that concludes the overview of the virtual meeting process.
Thank you, Joe. Agenda amendments. Chief, is there any request to amend the current agenda?
I have not received any.
Okay. Oral communications. Have we received any requests to address the board on non-agenda items?
I have not.
Okay. So what we're going to do now is
Mayor,
move.
Mr. Pat, we do have a hand raised for oral communications.
Oh, okay.
So at this time, I'm going to ask the member of the public to unmute themselves.
Hello, this is Becky Steinbrunner. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Miss Becky.
Thank you. I need that confirmation because I'm only coming in by telephone and I cannot see if you're doing a thumbs up or anything like that. So thank you, Mr. Serrano, for recognizing my raised hand via the telephone. I want to, because I did just join it as roll call was being taken, I would like verification that tonight's meeting is being recorded.
Yes, it is.
And excellent, thank you. And to that end, I really want to thank Mr. Serrano for putting the recorded meetings, past meetings, up on the website. That has really been a great benefit to the public. And I really want to thank you for doing that work, Mr. Serrano. And also to the board for voting to do that very transparent process. I am, however, very disappointed that the October 1st in-person town hall meeting was not recorded. And I did ask in advance if it were going to be, and later learned that it was not because it seemed like it was going to be too difficult. I really felt that at least the speakers themselves um, should have been recorded. I understand I was not able to attend that in-person town hall meeting, but I understand there was a lot of very valuable question and answer period between the public and the presenters. So I'm again very sorry that that did not get recorded for the benefit of those who could not attend. Um, I also want to make your board aware that there is a new process happening right now for the county-wide fire code adoption. Usually, each district adopts a set of fire codes. Sometimes they differ from one district to the next. But I learned about this at Central Fire District Board meeting last week. Central Fire District Board has not even seen it, and that was shocking to me. But it will be going
1 minute left,
before.
Miss Becky.
Thank you. It will be going before the County Board of Supervisors for approval on November 15th, as I understand it from Central Fire District Fire Marshal DeMars. I will try to digitize that and put it out, but I asked that it be put on Central Fire District's website, and I understand from Ms. Sarah Melton, it is now available via the Community Risk Reduction webpage. So again, that's a whole new process, lots of big changes for our county-wide fire code. Thank you very much.
Any further oral communications from the public? Okay, we'll move on to item 4, the consent calendar. There are 4 items under the consent calendar, and that the board can take one action to approve all 3 items under the consent calendar unless a member of the public or a board member wishes to pull the item for discussion. Is there anyone who would like to pull an item out of the consent calendar? Okay. Those items are the regular board meeting minutes, claims and disbursements, CalPERS, and compensation systems. So having no one ask for something to be pulled, Chief, can you take a vote?
Chair, we do need a motion and a second to approve these consent item calendar items.
Thank you. Do I have a motion from any of the board members to approve these items?
I move that we consider the consent calendar for approval.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion made by Director Landon and made by Director Dodds and seconded by Director Landon. All those in favor?
Now we need a roll call vote.
No, we need a roll call vote.
Sorry
Okay,
about that.
Director Vanrus.
Aye.
Director Meyer,
Aye.
Director Dodds,
Aye.
Director Landon,
Aye.
and Chair O'Connell.
Aye. Motion passes with all members present. Okay, discussion items. 5.1 is a review of the history and purchase of Measure T. Chief Laggy can give us a presentation on this item.
Yes, Director Landon at our last meeting requested that we put this on the agenda to kind of review what Measure T is for and also look at ways it can be taken off the tax rolls. So originally Measure T was put into for excess funds needed to purchase equipment and help with the construction of the station. We have been very lucky and been able to use some grants to help with the funding of PPE along with the funds from Measure T. It's also helped us complete the building and hopefully at some point we'll be able to repair the station using those same funds. As far as removing it from the tax roll, there's a couple ways that we can do that, or the board can do that. The first one is every year we are required to pass a resolution authorizing the county to make that collection. And if the board does not pass that resolution, it will not be collected. Let's see, the second one is to just retire the Measure T fund or the Measure T, and there really isn't a lot of, let's see here, what do you say here? It's not a very clear process on how to do that. And finally, the voters can, they can go ahead and try to get it on a ballot or to do a qualify it for the ballot and vote to have it removed. So those are the three options. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
This is Director Landon.
Yes, sir.
I realize this is just a protest vote at this time and probably in the future, other than the voters themselves getting the required signatures. I don't know how many it would be required. If Scotts Valley was to close that station like they say, I guess that would probably be the only, since it would be under Scotts Valley, you know, we're being annexed by Scotts Valley. That's not, as far as I know, that's a pretty firm thing, which I'll throw at Joe right now if he wants to answer that. The other thing I would say is there's no action required on this, obviously, because I mean, we could have a protest vote on the board if Scotts Valley wants to close the station and doesn't change their mind about that in any way, shape, or form at some point as we're walking out into the sunset here as it is. But I don't require any action or ask for any action at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion? And I would like to, I'd like to read something here quickly.
Chair, I just want to remind you and the board that we're talking about Measure T and not the SEI contract with the benefit assessment study. That's item 6.1. So I just want to reiterate to the board and to the public that we're talking about Measure T. So if there's any questions on Measure T, this is the opportunity to discuss that item. And Chair, I do see a hand raised from the public.
I still want to follow up, Joe. I don't know what this is Director Landon.
Yeah, Mr. Landon, I'll answer your question.
Yeah,
This reorganization is not being forced upon Branson 40 Fire. Scotts Valley Fire has indicated that they can provide services with or without the Branson 40 Fire Station. If we remove this reorganization discussion, this district, Branson 40 Fire, on their own will run out of money within a year, and the fire station will
Hey,
close and the
excuse
district
me,
will
Joe.
close. So the Scotts Valley Fire is not proposing to shut down the fire station. Scotts Valley Fire and LAFCO are trying to provide a solution to Branson 40, so we
I
prevent all
understand.
that from happening.
We have never gotten anything in writing from Scotts Valley. I'm not going to press the issue, Joe. There are legal requirements for this annexation. I don't have the numbers in front of me quoted from the state constitution, or, you quoted to us during one session. Maybe it's on our Zoom meetings, whatever. And I have nothing in writing from Scotts Valley or the board as far as as far as I know. We don't. I mean, there has been meetings through the months. I've asked for repeatedly meetings between Scotts Valley LAFCO and Scotts Valley chair and co-chair. I've repeatedly asked for written minutes on those meetings. I haven't gotten anything. Once again, we have a transparency problem. We have from the beginning in this process. But besides that, I don't want to beat a dead horse. I've never seen anything in writing from Scotts Valley that they said they were going to close that station. I just hear it from mostly you. And I mean, whatever. I'm not sitting in those meetings. You are. So, and I would just say at this point, that I think, this would be obviously, there's one other point that Don Jarvis made in the second public meeting that wasn't recorded, failing, I think, the people of Happy Valley by not recording that. I'm not going to be as polite as Becky Steinbrenner. She only gets 3 minutes. But I hope she comes back later in this meeting. But in any case, that second meeting, Don Jarvis did, as I remember, clarified Measure T as also contingencies. So that's kind of a big, broad, area. And I'll just close on that. I know if you can just affirm that, Joe. I know you heard Don say it. I would like that from you, and that's all I have.
Okay, Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to provide comments and clarification for Director Landon and for the rest of the board. There are a lot of stuff in writing. LAFCO did a countywide report and identified the distressed problems that Branson 40 Fire is facing. We have it in writing, an adopted resolution from Branson 40 Fire Board requesting that it get reorganized because it understood the distress situations that it's facing. We are coordinating with Scotts Valley Fire, Branson Fire, and LAFCO to identify how to transition this, because the status quo is not working and it will end within a year or so. Scotts Valley Fire has never said they will close down the fire station. What has been said constantly to the board and to the public is that it is underfunded and understaffed. And if Scotts Valley Fire would assume responsibilities for fire protection and medical services to the Branson 40 community, and the community wants to keep the fire station open, then they need to have a new benefit assessment to have at least 2 people on duty at that fire station. Scotts Valley Fire is not saying they're going to close the fire station. Scotts Valley Fire is saying, community, if you want it open, you need to fund it. That's has been consistent. That's what LAFCO has been saying also, that the Branson 40 community needs to determine the future of the fire station. Scotts Valley Fire does not need this merger. And I want to repeat this to everyone. This is the only solution to prevent Branson 40 community from losing fire protection and medical services, because the current status of Branson 40 Fire is broken. And you're absolutely right that there's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of information because you have no staff. When LAFCO came in is because it was a necessity. There was no information available on the website. There was no staff reports. LAFCO had to come in and clean that up. And I'm not going to be here providing that information forever because I'm not your staff, but I am helping because I am concerned about the safety of the community. So again, this is an opportunity for Branson 40 Fire to make their own decisions on their future. LAFCO's not forcing this on you. Scotts Valley Fires is not forcing this on you, but we're trying to help you, period.
Okay, Joe, one last comment. Nobody's forcing anything, okay, on anybody. I get it. And, you know, I don't need it in writing. We get
And
the
Director
message.
Landon, you and I met. I met with you with Becky when you requested to
Are
meet
you
with
gonna,
LAFCO.
are you gonna let me ask?
And also you met with Chief Whittle. So there have been attempts to meet with you, and we're all, and on top of that, you have two representatives for Branson 40 Fire Board meeting with LAFCO and Scotts Valley Fire as part of this joint ad hoc committee group. So there are collaborative efforts with both districts and LAFCO. That is going on.
Yeah, Joe, I just want to make one point, okay? And that is, you know, nobody's forcing anybody. We get the general idea of this. Finally, everybody's kind of getting it. The other thing is, just to make that no fault, you know, thing, kind of a real issue, since you seem that's important. I'd like everybody to know that the whole board voted to continue this merger. We've always wanted to merge with Scotts Valley. All of a sudden, oh, they gonna want to merge with us. Out of the blue after 6 years of trying to do this, and then we signed a LAFCO contract, which I regret, and I know I have wording about that regret, but I went along with the, you know, the group think here, and I said, in that contract it stated that only Branson 40 would be responsible for any stepping out of contract in this merger. We would hold nobody else liable. There was all kinds of legal schmeagle in that thing that I went along with, and we all did. So, you know, Joe, this, you know, nobody's pushing anybody thing, you know, it goes just so far, and that's all I have to say.
Okay,
Can I ask a question to Joe? Are there any other fire districts in our county that only have one paid staff member on duty at any given time?
There are other fire districts in rural areas that do have a large number of districts. They have paid firefighters and volunteers to station it, but to give you, I don't have the exact district of who has one person on duty. They always have at least 2 minimum people on duty, up to 3. Some agencies have up to 5 to 7.
5 to 7 as in volunteers?
Yeah, some districts still rely on volunteers, and luckily for them, they do have volunteers that help them station the fire stations, staff the fire stations, I'm sorry.
But they do have one paid staff member on duty with a volunteer backup.
Correct. That's my understanding. And just to clarify, I want to make sure that the information I give you is accurate. LAFCO's countywide fire report identifies all the staffing for every single fire station in the county. So I just want to direct you and the board and the public to that report that has the exact numbers.
So is a volunteer somebody that you can guarantee that will be there on site in the event of a emergency?
I would have to defer to the fire chiefs on the way they operate.
And then aren't we within 5 miles of any of the 3 of the largest districts or largest fire districts in
Yes, so
county?
I'm sorry. Yes, you're correct. Branson 40 is surrounded by other fire districts. You have Scotts Valley Fire, you have the city of Santa Cruz and their fire department, as well as Central Fire. And on top of that, you also have CAL FIRE under CSA 48. So Branson 40 is in a situation where they're surrounded by other fire districts.
Thank you.
Chief Lackey, I think you can let us know what stations existing have one staff person on, hired staff. My understanding, it's Boulder Creek, Felton, and Ben Lomond.
They all have a fire chief that is staffed. None of those departments will run calls with one person. They all wait for personnel to show up. A minimum of 2, sometimes 3, depending on the station. So
Thank you.
which are volunteer staff.
Correct, but they all have the volunteers to come staff the station.
Okay.
Chair, you do have a member of the public requesting to speak on this item. Chair O'Connell.
Yes,
Is this an opportunity for the public to provide comments on this item?
um, yes, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Becky, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Thank you. This is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Thank you. I appreciate the confirmation. I'm interested in this because I live in an area where consolidation did happen between Central and Aptos de Selva, and I saw how that process went. What concerns me about this is that it seems upside down. When Aptos and Central were considering consolidation, and it was a very long process, there was a feasibility study done by a consultant named ESCI, not related to the one that this board has been considering for a benefit assessment. It was not about taxation. It was actually a comparison of service that would happen if there were a consolidation. It examined costs. It examined the real benefit and what it would take to make it happen. I have not seen that level of study done for this consolidation. I am aware that there is potentially that kind of study underway by a consultant called AP Triton that LAFCO is actually paying for, because there are other consolidations, fire agency consolidations in the county that LAFCO is helping with and supporting in other areas of the county. So I did receive recent confirmation from Mr. Serrano that the AP Triton consultant examination would include the Branson 40 fire and the Scotts Valley fire consolidation. So it seems to me that the Measure T issue really needs to be examined and would be examined in that. I have contacted Ms. Tricia Weber at county elections to ask her what is the definition of a contingency as it is stated in Measure T. She said that really depends on how the board wants to define it.
1 minute left, Ms. Becky.
Thank you. The board could take action to define contingencies to include staffing. The community could amend Measure T to increase funding and to include specifically staffing. So there are other ways, and I hope that the community will really look into getting a good feasibility study and asking how Measure T could be amended if needed to support keeping your fire station staffed. Thank you.
No further comments.
No, sir.
Okay, then we'll move on to 6.1. Before we start into 6.1, which is consulting group benefit assessment proposal, I want to remind the board about their duty and responsibility to represent the community at large. And I'd like to ask Nick Clare to verify those duties for us. Nick Clare is our legal advisor. I believe he's on this Zoom.
One second, Chair, I'm promoting your legal counsel to the panelists.
Okay, you got me? Sorry. Thank you for the promotion. I just wanted to real quick just remind everybody that as board members, you have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of the district and the public as a whole. And there's a couple of laws around that as well. In particular, under the Political Reform Act, public officials are prohibited from participating in the making of decisions that would have a reasonably foreseeable effect on their financial interests. So that's one. Also, under the common law conflict of interest doctrine, a public official is obligated to exercise their powers with disinterested skill, zeal, and diligence, and primarily for the benefit of the public. And I just want to point out this doctrine requires public officials and employees to avoid placing themselves in a position in which their personal interests may come into conflict with their duty to the public. This doctrine in particular is concerned not only with actual conflicts like the Political Reform Act is, but with any situation where there may be an appearance of impropriety due to a temptation to act for personal or private reasons. So just putting this all together, each board member is statutorily required and, per the case law and so forth, to put aside private motivations and act solely in the best interest of the district and the community as a whole. Have to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for our legal counsel? Okay. So we'll proceed with the presentation by Chief Lackey.
We have SCI here who's going to do a presentation so we can all understand how the benefit assessment will proceed if it's voted on to go forward. So, Mr. Bliss.
Great. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you, Chief Lackey. Thank you, members of the board, member of public staff. My name's John Bliss, and I'm president of a company called SCI Consulting. We're based over in Solano County, and we work with public agencies to help them with funding, operational funding primarily. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Edric Kwan. So if whoever's running the Zoom could add him as a panelist, I think that would be helpful as well. And I have a presentation that we can go through here. What I'd like to do before we go into the slides, and you've all seen many of PowerPoints in your day, I want to just kind of give you a sense of the options available to you. I had the opportunity, obviously, I've been on the meeting, and so I know there are you're under some financial duress. And so I want to first talk broadly about what we're seeing up and down the state of California for districts that are in a similar situation. And then we can kind of go through the process here. Essentially, there's lots of fire districts in the state of California. Many of them are single station, many of them are underfunded and are trying to transition culturally between being all volunteer and to career. And that has been a tough transition for many of them, and many of them need some additional revenue to do that. Local governments, reliable annual revenue for local governments in California is tough. We have a couple of paths forward that are common, and one of them is called a special tax, and one of them is called a benefit assessment. They both have warts, they both have pros and cons. There's not one that's necessarily better than the other. In many cases, and both were written by the Jarvis Taxpayers Association, so they're both equally as conservative. Our state actually is more conservative than most in terms of revenue. And in the other 49 states, it would just require a vote of your board, believe it or not, to be able to put some sort of tax fee or assessment on the property tax. In California, we require additional analysis and balloting. And so we work with fire districts and fire departments up and down the state, and we help them through a special tax process as well as through a benefit assessment. For lots of agencies, particularly in areas that are more rural and frankly more politically conservative, that have large properties and small properties, are rural, have ag, that kind of thing. The more popular approach, and the one that we often recommend, is the benefit assessment. It's a conservative path forward that allows every property owner to vote and participate. And in fact, they get to participate in the same proportion that they would be assessed. And I'll explain that a little bit later. But it's a common method. Our firm does about 5 of these a year. We're doing a lot this year, probably because there's an awareness of fire issues. So we're doing a bunch in Yolo County. We, a few years ago, helped CSA 48 here in Santa Cruz County. We worked with the Mosquito District. We're working with Pajaro Valley this year as well. And so I'm going to walk you through the process now. You can save your questions till the end. You can ask them as I'm going along, and we'll tell you what we've seen and help you, give you the information. And then we understand you have a difficult decision. Asking the public, asking private property owners for additional revenue is always difficult. It's something you want to do as seldom as possible. When you do it, you want to take a conservative, slow path forward and make sure you get it right. And so we're happy to work with you and share what we've done. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Our slides are fairly simple and straightforward. Essentially, a benefit assessment process requires a couple of steps. It's usually about a 6-month process. And the first and most important, well, I shouldn't say the most important. The first step is the preparation of an engineer's report by a licensed civil engineer. Edrig and I are both licensed civil engineers, so we can say this. It's a 40 or 50 page study. It doesn't have a lot of engineering in it, but it essentially responds to a couple of requirements having to do with the benefit to the properties, the budget, the services, and most importantly, what we call the methodology or apportionment, which is how we determine how much each property, based on the use and the size and the location and a variety of things, each parcel is assessed. And we actually go parcel by parcel, and each one is assessed based on 4 main attributes. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. And so the process is very stepwise. So if you decide to go forward and you use our firm or you use one of our competitors, if you're going to do a benefit assessment, we would work closely with staff. And in parallel to that, we would do a very detailed analysis of your parcels, and we would look at aerials, drive-bys. We would look at county data. As it turns out, I grew up in Santa Clara County, not far from Santa Cruz County, and my family owned property in Santa Cruz County for most of my life. So I'm actually familiar with your area. So I get some of the special challenges that you have in terms of the variety of types of parcels. But so we do drive-bys, and we study in great detail your particular parcels. We study in great detail your services, and we come up with formulas essentially that will assess your parcels and assess and calculate the special benefit. We then return to you, and again, you're going to get a number of bites at the apple going forward, and we present the engineering finding to you. And that finding actually includes a roll that tells how much each property would be assessed, and they're all likely going to be different. And then and how we assess them. And then you're asked to make kind of a big green light, red light decision. You accept that engineer's study and you accept our approach. And would you agree to mail out notices and ballots? And I'm going to talk about that next. If you decide to go forward, then we go to the next step, and that's the balloting. And so every property owner within your district would receive a ballot by mail. And this is all spelled out by Prop 218, which Jarvis Taxpayers Association put before voters in the 90s. And this is all kind of spelled out in a process. It's a 45-day mailed balloting period. And each property owner gets a ballot in the mail. And the ballot is a big envelope, and it says official ballot on the outside. It would have your logo as the return address. And there's 3 things inside of it. And one of them is a postage paid return envelope. That's a nice one. There's a ballot which will list all your parcels and the amount of assessment on each parcel. And then you can vote yes or no. You sign your name, you fold it in half, and you mail it back. And we'll talk about how it tabulates at the end. And then the third thing in that envelope is what we call the notice. And the notice is a requirement, and it actually is an invitation and information to a public hearing that's an additional protection for taxpayers at the end of the 45 days. So yeah, people get to ballot, and then there's a special public hearing at the end where property owners can give you more information to the board to help you make a decision. And the decision would be, if it's approved, would you like to assess it? The notice also gives additional information. And there's lots of required information. How are the assessments calculated? What are the services? A variety of different things that are required in that notice, so that the property owner can make a reasonable decision whether they want to assess themselves. That's a heavy lift. Do you want to assess yourself for these services? The ballots are mailed back, and then at the end we have a public hearing, and that's at the 45 days at the end of that public hearing, and we tabulate the ballots. And the ballots are actually tabulated in a way, these are common, but they're not commonly known. So almost everyone has assessments on their Prop 218 assessments on their property bills in California, but it's not as well known for whatever reason than a special tax. And here is how we tabulate it, and this is required by Jarvis by Prop 218. And that is, it's essentially, for it to be approved, 50% plus one of the returned ballots weighted by their proposed assessment must be in support. So what does that mean? Let's say that let's say we calculated a single family home on a 1/4 acre lot. I know there are not a lot of those, but there's some. A single family home on a 1/4 acre lot. Let's say we calculated that was going to be $100 a year, and the vacant lot next door to it would be $25 a year. And again, this is just hypothetically, I'm just giving you some numbers. And my colleague Edrig owns that vacant lot, and he's got the 25. So he would get a ballot in the mail that say $25. I would get on a ballot in the mail. I'd list my personal name on $100. I get 100 votes. He gets 25 votes. Let's say we have another friend that's a large property owner that has lots of acres, and there's some timber harvest on it, something like that, and their assessment is calculated at $250 a year. They get 250 votes. And the reason Jarvis designed it that way, and there's an elegance to it, is that if you have to pay more, you ought to get more voting power. So it's essentially, you can think of it as $1 a vote, yes or no. So we tabulate all the yes ballots and all the dollars of assessment on the yes, all the dollars of assessment on the no. And if there's more dollars of assessment on the yes, then the assessment is, then the board, you all, are empowered to vote to impose that assessment. And what you would likely do is direct, and we would do it, or you do it directly, to have it as a line on the property tax bill. It would be collected by the county and then dispersed to you like it sounds like your Measure T or any traditional tax. There's a couple of things about an assessment that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about kind of the parallel outreach, and then I promise I'll stop talking, and then we can go over some of this stuff. Actually, we'll do a little bit more on the engineering first, but a couple of things to note. An assessment is, there's a couple of options you would have that you should consider, whether you work with us or someone else or whatever you do, and one of them is a consumer price index. We highly recommend that you consider a consumer price index that's optional for any assessment. The value of money changes over time, and it decreases over time, and inflation is a real thing. So we always recommended that it's voted on by the board, and the board would make the decision each year whether you would like to impose an adjustment mechanism for inflation or an increase in the consumer price index. Our firm is pretty conservative, so we recommend that you key it to the actual US Department of Labor Consumer Price Index, which is huge this year, but in most years it's 1 or 2%. But we always recommend you put a cap on it, so it can't be more than 3% a year or 4%. So that's something to consider. Some property owners react negatively to it, but if you sit down and talk to them and say, if you don't put that CPI on, then you're going to be going out for another balloting at some time sooner. The CPI protects against that, so we like that. The other consideration is what's called a sunset or an expiration. And an expiration is, some ballot measures say this will expire after 9 years or 20 years. Again, some of those are popular. They're usually having to do with a bond measure where you pay something off. For this assessment, you're looking at operational, so you will need it every year. So we usually do not recommend some sort of expiration, a sunset. But those are both things we'll talk about more. I'd be happy to answer and give you some recommendations. But let's and if whoever's running the PowerPoint, if you can go to the next slide. I'm not gonna just live or die by these slides. But this one is kind of important because I oftentimes, and again, I want to spend some time, and you can kick me under the table if I'm giving too much detail, but for you all, understanding the methodology is very, very important. It's a decision you would have to make, and you would review the engineer's report very, very carefully. The public is interested in the fire protection and the cost and that kind of stuff. But the devil is in the details, and this is an important decision for you guys, and so you need to understand it. So I want to talk a little bit about our methodology. So as an engineer, we take a responsibility on how we are going to apportion the assessment to the different parcels. There are different approaches, and there aren't a lot of firms that do what we do, but there are others. Our approaches are always reviewed by council, and we tend to be on the conservative side. We tend to have lots of detail and lots of analysis. We think that's stronger and better, and we actually think voters prefer that. And so for a fire measure like yours, we typically look at 4 major attributes of any piece of property. And the first one that we would look at would be the use of the property, and that use of the property gives us information about fire risk. So certain uses, a vacant lot has less fire risk than a single family home. A fireworks factory would have a high risk, and other types of shopping centers may not. So we look at the use and we assign it a fire risk factor. Associated with that fire risk factor, we look at the relative replacement costs. So if it was a fireworks factory and it was an expensive one, that would tend to be a higher assessment. High risk, high replacement cost goes up. If it was a concrete pad that was a vacant lot that no one used, it would be low risk and low cost to replace. So those are two. So the fire risk and the replacement cost. In addition to that, we look at 2 other factors, and one of them we look at is the distance from the fire station. And that's very, very important, particularly in a rural area like Santa Cruz County, and we're able to look at that distance and then key it to make it drivable. Because as you know, the way the county is laid out, or with the different ridges, you can be physically very close, but the access can be a long time. So it's actually the driving distance is what we look at. And if you're closer to a fire station, you get more value than if you're further away, particularly in time of response. We also would look, in your case, at the CAL FIRE or the FEMA maps to see if there's any variation. And I should know this, I don't know if there's any variation in fire hazard risk. So we look at those different factors for each of the parcels. In addition, the factors vary on size. And so we typically, and it's usually based on acreage. So if you have an agriculture, let's say this wouldn't be in your area, but let's say we had like a rangeland, a chaparral rangeland, or let's even say it's a desert. So very, very low risk of ignition, but a very big parcel. You might have a very low rate per acre, but you have lots of acres, and so it multiplies like that. So it's the size of it plus those 4 factors. In your case, we would have in the engineer's report lots of detail on the formula, and then we have a levy rule which calculates out for each particular parcel what that cost is. So let's go ahead to let's scroll through a couple of these. I think I've touched everything. Let's go to the next slide, please. We talked about this one already. That's the balloting. This is an example of a ballot. This is actually CSA 48. Let's go to the next slide. That's the yes, no. And so here, this is not a great example because this has the assessments for, it shows the same parcel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a bunch of times, and they have the same rate. So that would be highly, highly unusual unless you're in some sort of weird subdivision where everything was the same size. In your district, this wouldn't be. If someone owned more than one parcel, they would show the parcel number and then the uniquely developed a proposed assessment for that. So the property owner can take a look at that, say, for these parcels, this is the dollar amount, this is what I'd have to pay, turn it over, vote the yes or the no, sign it, put it in the envelope and send it back. So let's go to the next slide. This is just a good example. This is, again, the CSA 48. This is what the notice looks like. It's just like a voter guide. It gives information. We would have phone numbers available. People can ask questions. If we put the engineer's report on the website, all kinds of stuff. All of that type of transparency and information is extremely critical in something like this. So let's go to the next one. That's what the outgoing envelope and the return envelope looked like. And let's go to the next slide. We talked about the tabulation already, so let's proceed. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation, but I do want to spend 2 or 3 more minutes to talk a little bit about timing. So usually it's about a 6 months process. We live or die by a particular date, and that date is August 10th of each year. And on August 10th of each year, you have to submit any levies to the Santa Cruz County auditor tax collector to collect that year. So if you guys went forward with this process in the near term, we would want to get everything done by August 10th of 2023. You would get your first installment of revenue in December of 2023, and the second, and that'd be about 50%. You get another 40% in April, and probably the final 10% in June, something like that. If you said, you know what, we would like to go a little slower pace, that's fine. But realize if you don't get everything done by August 10th of 2023, the next one would be August 10th of 2024, and you would get your revenue, your first revenue in December of 2024. Just to give you something on that. In terms of there's a parallel process that's very, very important, and it's key in smaller districts like this, and that is community outreach. Community outreach for something like this is not raw vote yes, someone on a street corner with a sign. That will not work. That will not appeal. But community outreach in something like this is detailed. It's face-to-face. It's going slowly through the budget, explaining what the costs and services are, going through how the rates were created, that kind of thing. We've had the best luck with that more recently in community meetings. Some are virtual, most of them are face-to-face. So our firm does lots of community meetings. They're almost like workshops. People can come, we give an overview, and then we sit with them individually and talk to them about it. We'd also, of course, encourage you to put information on your website. If there's any media, Facebook, anything like that, of course, is important. But in something like this, this is based on personal relationships, personal reputation. The facts and the detail in the information need to be rigorous. They need to be detailed. You need to be able to explain exactly how you will spend this money, why you need this money, what is the status of your station, what's the status of other funding mechanisms, what's the status of your apparatus, what's the status of your staffing, that type of thing. So it's an informational type outreach. It's not raw, shallow vote yes. It's an information sharing. And if you do that, the districts we've worked with up and down California, we've had a very high degree of success. But as I say, we take it slow. We do it in a conservative, detailed approach, and we think that works. We think that's the way to do it. That we would appreciate and look forward to the opportunity to work with you. You're the type of district we work with a lot, and we like to work. We like the personal relationships. We like working in rural California. And we think we are pretty good at knowing the challenges. We'd have lots to learn from you personally sitting down with you. And so that kind of concludes my comments. Edrig, is there anything that you would like to add? And then we're happy to answer questions and enter into a discussion. I think Edrig gave the thumbs up, so I think I covered it. I did all right. So we're happy to answer any questions as you consider this and make these tough decisions.
Well, thanks a lot for that. This is Director Landon. Hey, finally we're getting this detailed information. It's really great to hear it. It's great to hear from you, the president, and everything. You're taking your.
It's a small company. It's not very impressive to be president.
In any case, I have some comments and questions, and if you can just take a couple of notes while I'm talking, I appreciate it, and then we can get back to what I went over. I will emphasize this is kind of in this process so far. We've kind of had the cart before the horse. You probably realize that we voted down this proposal from you. I haven't seen it really in quite detail. Joe has offered a few pages in previous sessions, but I wanted to say you brought up a lot of stuff. I did read what Joe had with the agenda items, more or less, and I I guess I wanted to say, first of all, in your statements that I got from Joe with the agenda, that you have a 94 percentile success rate. That's impressive. And I might also preface that with what you said about the conservative Jarvis report and how they, made Prop 218 their answer, as I believe, to Prop 13 and the loss of Prop 13 benefits to commercial properties in California. I know I'm getting a little political, but I think that's why Jarvis said, oh, let's go with this. We'll give the local communities a way, and what I believe as an unfair way, really, with this weighted vote. I'm sorry if that's abrupt, but I went through the information and I didn't see really good definitions of the weighted vote. There was not one word. I did a search, for weighted in the information I got with the agenda package. There also wasn't one word about the word using a search for audit, which I find kind of fascinating. Anyway, those are my preface points. You probably know the angle I'm coming from here. With the points that you made, I wanted to say a couple of things. Of course, in my mind, Jarvis in their recommendations compromised with what the state, which I would never refer to as conservative in their tax requirements in this state, that Jarvis compromised and came up with this solution with this this special benefits assessment, a way of saying, basically, if your neighbor has a big property, they have a bigger vote. It's as simple as that. Now, the tabulation of the vote is very interesting too. You kind of went through that. You said a third party, independent party. There are, before I ask you that any definitions of that, or actually when you respond to all this that I'm giving you, I wanted to ask the idea that I lost my place, excuse me. The idea that the weighted vote, okay, is not really something anybody knows about but you guys. And in the end, I believe you hook your computers up possibly with whoever this third party is, and you figure out that weighted vote, and you have a 94 percentile win on this. congratulations on that. That's quite a feat. But in any case, it kind of goes along with why I'm arguing this this whole thing so strongly. Besides, I think it's unfair, generally speaking, to have one section of the annexed property of Scotts Valley, which they'll own, and all our equipment, all our land and everything, is going to be paying this outrageous amount, probably more than, you know, they pay in the Hollywood Hills with movie stars. It's going to be a really high number, which I want to go over a little later outside of addressing your report. To get back to the way of calculating this, and I believe we've been using the phrase weighted vote. You said $1 of assessment to $1 vote. That was, I think, as clear as I got it from you guys. Anyway, and a third-party tabulation. And you have all these parameters. So it's interesting, you said it wasn't an engineering report, which I have said in the past. This is one, I mean, it's a lot of information, and it's a lot of politicking and information, and to get this passed. And my idea is that it's one big giant spreadsheet, and you have to reduce it. You have to, excuse me, I'm an engineer myself. You have to reduce it to a formula. I mean, something that you can plug in parameters to take the assessment and come up with a vote. My question I went over, I skipped over was, you might jot this down. We only got your proposal. We got one proposal. I was wondering how many times have you gone through this process where a small area like ours only had one proposal? That would be an interesting question. Getting back to this formula thing and the engineering of it all, the vote is everything, and your success rate is so overwhelming. I'm, you know, and I say this tongue in cheek because it's more or less, with a weighted vote, people who have money are going to get a bigger vote because they'll have a bigger property. Usually they don't care that much about money. It might be $100 to me. It might be $1,700 to somebody else. You know, that's money. That starts to be serious money when you get up there. And we have some kind of rough estimates from the LAVCO consultant, Don Jarvis, which you can get kind of close. You know, like we had one question. It was interesting where it came from exactly, but it was, I think it was one of the public meetings we had, and they said, well, you know, how much does it cost for 3 more full-time staff firefighters? And Don Jarvis said it's about $1 million. And I think you have to figure in, you know, higher salaries, Don. I'm not sure if you figured that in, but anyway, it's higher salaries at Scotts Valley. So, you know, you divide that by the parcels and you kind of get a rough number. And the question was, why do we need a $50,000 consultant? Well, we know the answer to that, and you can correct me later if I'm wrong. It's because this is how it works. This is the law. And we're following the law here. And you know, I wouldn't speak any other way about the law. I respect it completely. It's just that the Jarvis compromise on Prop 18, saving the taxes for and keeping those businesses here in California, rather than leaving if they lost their Prop 13, they gave the local constituents a compromise, and that is this weighted vote. And the weighted vote, in my mind, is everything. It's not fair. It's not fair to everyone in this district, and I've been arguing that from the beginning. Maybe you can argue differently how it would be fair. So at this point, I'll shut up, and maybe you can answer some of those questions. Thanks a lot.
Board Member Landon, I appreciate that. I was jotting some things down, so why don't I kind of work my way through? You bring up some great points, and some of them I would agree with, and they're just kind of discussion points. The first one you brought up was complimentary to us with the 94%. That is our winning rate when we do a survey. In this case, we are not planning to do a survey, and so our winning rate isn't as high. It's still high. It's still in the high 80s, but I almost never talk about that when I'm talking to folks that I wanna work with. It is in our proposal, and it's in some of our marketing information, because I don't want people to say, oh, if we sign up for them, we've got this high chance of winning. And the reason I don't want you to think that is I want to be very straightforward. If you go forward and you work with us, I can't talk about other firms, you're going to be working hard. So we're going to need you board members, to get involved. It's lots of work on your side. There's not a silver bullet. There's not a button you push. It's a lot of time engaging property owners directly and talking to them. That's the way that's the way and the only way it'll get passed. And so the 94% cuts both ways. I don't want people to think, oh, this is a shoo-in. It is not. It's still a lot of work. I think we have a high percentage because we're conservative. We work slowly and closely with our clients, and that's why we win. It's a lot of work. It's not, we don't have it figured out. There's not a formula. You talked about Jarvis. Here's my understanding of Jarvis, just to add some flavor and some history. So Jarvis really revolutionized California with Prop 13, and it was part of a taxpayers revolt as property tax was typically about 3%. Now assessed values were a lot lower then, but it was relatively high, and so they pushed back with Prop 218. And Prop 218 dealt with property tax primarily. However, there were other mechanisms on the books. One of them was this thing called this benefit assessment. So Prop 218 to Jarvis was a fix. It was they hadn't dealt with it in Prop 13, and they were afraid that these assessments were being passed just willy-nilly without any rules. So Prop 218 is essentially a set of rules to pass an assessment, and they believe, and I believe, it's a conservative approach. Jarvis is conservative when it comes to taxes. And so the decision they made to weight the votes, have a 50%, but weight the votes. Again, you can argue it, and board member Landon, I see your point completely. You can argue it either way. I like it because, as I said, there's an elegance to it. You get to vote in what you have to pay, and it avoids a problem with taxes. A typical tax, an apartment owner, an apartment building full of voters can all vote yes and impose a property tax on the owner of the building. And that's the city of Santa Cruz, city of Santa Monica, Berkeley are famous for doing taxes because they have so many students, and students vote yes, but they don't own property. A benefit assessment avoids that, and that was Jarvis's intent, is to have a fairer way where everyone that has to pay gets a voice. You can be registered to vote in Oklahoma City, but own property in Branson Forte, you're going to have to pay it. So you ought to get an opportunity to vote, and you do. The other thing that I think that might give you some comfort, or at least cause you to think a little bit more about this, is the reality is it's not the big property owner that's passing these things. In most cases that we work with, and I think that'd be true, it's the single family homeowners, the smaller property owners, that are actually the yes votes, particularly for fire. We see that typically, and it's the larger property owners. They may be business entities, they may be out of the area, and they're usually less supportive. So the idea of the big bad property owner forcing the assessment on a smaller property owner who has less money and less vote, that's not what we're seeing. We're actually seeing the opposite of it. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but we're seeing the smaller voter that's concerned about the community, that lives there full time. They're typically supportive of this, and it's usually the larger property owner that is less supportive. But anyway, let me continue, because these are all good questions. We talked about weight. Oh yeah, tabulation. Let's talk about tabulation. I probably should have given more detail. The tabulation, ought to be done by a disinterested third party. It's required that it's done in public, and we always do it in public. A small district like you, we'd actually tabulate the evening right after the public hearing. Edric and I would be here, probably Valerie, who some of you have met, would be here, and probably the three of us would open each envelope in plain view. We would hide the names of the ballots. We think anonymity is important, so you wouldn't be able to see that, but you'd be able to see our pile of yes and our pile of no. We would do it in public. It's not a secret ballot like a regular tax or registered voter, so you can see the actual thing. We would work under direction legally of the clerk of your board. If you weren't comfortable with that and you wanted someone else, we could recommend a CPA. We could, in some areas, in fact, where was that we did it? Maybe it was in San Mateo County. We invited in the League of Women Voters, and the League of Women Voters is there's chapters all over the place. They're very interested in tabulation and fairness in elections, and they could do it, or they could oversee it. I think I'm confident we could come up with a tabulation that you're very comfortable with. And I know there's this black box effect. Oh, it's going to go into this fancy spreadsheet. Not really. You're going to see these printed ballots. You're going to see the signatures on them, or I'm not going to show you the names, but you're going to see that they were signed. You can see the dollar amounts. It's very visual. It's very straightforward. It isn't black boxy, that kind of thing. So we think the tabulation is something that we could get you comfortable with. You asked something about the proposal, and that's a good question. So let me get real honest with that. There's 2 or 3 firms in the state of California that do our kind of work. One of them is called NBS. One of them is called Wildan. There's actually a 4th one, I would say, Harris. We're happy to give you our contacts there, that type of thing. Our firm is different in that we tend to do more that is that in rural fire districts. We do most of the rural fire districts in the state, but we do compete with them. It keeps our pricing honest. You can talk to Pajaro Valley, you can talk to Yolo County, you can talk to CSA 48 and see our costs. I think our costs are reasonable and rational in terms of this. We do work a lot sole source. So we get a lot of contracts where they check out other firms, they ask for proposals from other firms, and we're the ones that come and sit down with them and talk to them like they are today. So I think we earn it, but we do a lot that is direct hire, but we're always happy to compete, and we're always happy to compare our services and our proposal to other firms. There are certain types of projects. It's actually not an assessment. It's something called a property related fee for storm drainage that are very competitive, that our competitors will always go. There'll be 3 or 4 of us. So we're in it most of the time in terms of that. So we're comfortable with that. That the rate we charge, as I say, it's fair. I know it's high. I know this is a heavy lift. That's why we come to you, not being salesy at all, but rather giving you the information. This is a difficult decision. You're under financial duress already. I wish our costs were cheaper. They are. We keep them down. It's lots of work to do the parcel analysis. It's lots of work to get the engineer's report right, because it's going to go under legal scrutiny, and we want it as airtight as possible. Nothing is perfectly airtight, but we put a lot of time in it. There's a lot of kind of work that goes into doing what we do. I wish we could charge less, but this is we're a for-profit firm, and those are the rates that we charge. I think I can say with comfort, if you did go one of our competitors, the price would most likely be higher. We're on that. We think we're the best firm, and we also think our pricing is the most competitive. So I feel strongly about that, and I think all the items that I wrote down on the Post-its, I think I covered, but I'm always, if there's additional questions, or I know you are trying to collect your thoughts, or if there's other things you want to talk about, please don't hesitate. I'll keep talking and sharing what we've learned with you to help you make that decision.
Well, that's just great. Thanks an awful lot for that. Of course, I have some follow-ups from what you just said. The tabulation, back to that, the yes or no's, and independent third, I appreciate that, and the Women's League watching the yes and no's, and I'm not concerned about the yes and no's. I'm concerned about the final tally, which is going to be weighted with my understanding of a proprietary formula. Now, you have a thing called a where is it? The single family equivalent,
Equivalent, yeah.
single family equivalent benefit unit. I'm looking at your CSA 48.
Sure.
So I assume in your tabulations, you said it's not a spreadsheet and it's not as simple as that, but I want to know what it is. You know, this SFE is
Yeah.
part of it. And then if you can confirm or deny or clarify, these votes get tabulated, they go into some computer and they get massaged with the weighted factor, which is a proprietary, my understand, formula. What would be nice is if we had ballots that actually had the assessment and then their vote right there. Now that would be an audit
They do
trail.
have the assessment amount right on them. So you can.
No, the vote, what the vote would be. So then the auditors and everybody watching can go, oh, this is a 3 vote. This is a 1 vote. This is a, you understand?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's a big concern of mine. I don't, we can agree to disagree about this Jarvis thing and the smaller, I'm way off on this idea of richer people voting yes because they have money. And this ballot is going to be huge. It's going to be, like I said, more than the Hollywood Hill movie stars are going to be paying for this one little area of Scotts Valley that they're annexing. I appreciate everything that Scotts Valley has done for us. I really, really like the department. It's amazing. They covered 40% of our calls. They got there first. The LAFCO report is accurate. They can more than with their people, that their medical people, they're get there early. We have a much stronger medical team, and they can back up their trucks because there's 2 guys, stuff like that. I'm going back here a little bit, but
So Director Landon, could
go ahead.
you, I'd like to make sure that all the board members get to answer questions. So could you kind of, let's get this moving on?
Well, I'm not going to say yes or no at this point. I'm sorry. This is very important to the community, and I just laid out a couple more very important questions. And I don't think I'm done. This is, but I'll shut up for now. Sure.
No, I think you've given them some good questions to answer. Let's hear his answers.
I want to be clear on the tabulation. It's extremely important. And the proprietary formulas. I want to, and I'm not doing a good job explaining that that's actually very transparent and clear. And you mentioned something called an SFE, a single family equivalent. And that's actually a unit we use to make it simpler and clearer. And so you could think of it as a benefit unit. And so we use what is a single family home. Let's say a single family home is going to be $100 a year. It calculates out to $100 a year. That would, we use that single family home, we give it a benefit unit of 1. It's kind of a vocabulary to make it easier to explain. And the example I gave earlier is, let's say a vacant lot is a 0.25 single family equivalents, or 0.25 benefit units. That is something that you can, that's what it's assigned. The house is a 1, the vacant lot is a 0.25, the acre of timber is a 0.01 or some small amount per acre. And then you just multiply that by the rate. And so that's to help explain that benefit unit. I know it may seem a little exotic now, but as you get more comfortable with it, that would make sense. And then your question goes back to tabulation and transparency. And I want you to know, each ballot does actually list it's listed as a dollar amount, but that's the number of votes. So if the dollar amount says 100, so each ballot, you could say, this is a yes ballot for 100 votes. And then the next one is, this is a yes ballot or a no ballot for 25 votes. So it's actually right on there. We can, as we go through, we tabulate them. And this isn't a lot of, frankly, this is not a lot of ballots. We did one where we had 700,000 ballots. We're going to get about 50% of return, 70% of return on your number of ballots. So this is a small pile of ballots, and we can put it on a piece of paper, a spreadsheet, whatever you want, and it would say, this ballot it's a yes and that many dollars, and anyone can audit it and go through, and the ballots are sitting right there so they can check all of that. In terms of how the assessment is calculated, again, you are correct. We do use computers to calculate it. We put in those attributes, the use, the size, the number of acres. Is it in a high fire hazard area? Is it, how far is it? What tranche is it? Driving distance? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 20 minutes from the station? What's the use of it? How risky is that use? And the last one is, what is the replacement cost? And so we do use a computer to figure out, but it's all very visual. You could see for each parcel, we can give you that table. So some of the stuff you've mentioned, I agree philosophically. We can talk, is it good weighting or not? And there's no right answer for that. But I am confident we could give you information on the tabulation and how we calculate the assessments that is clear and clean and easy to digest.
Thank
So
you.
do we have any other questions from any other board members before we continue? Anybody else?
No other board members have a question? Dee? Kurt? I think that the one thing that it's how you do the assessment, and those factors that you use do seem to make this more equitable for the way that it's calculated, and that was the original intent, it sounds like, from the get-go. And when I did see a chart or a graphic at one point in time that showed all those 4 points put together on one graphic that was really pretty self-explanatory, and it's easier to see, but that by using the process of figuring out the replacement cost of the house to begin with, or the property, that is based on several factors, but using that figure is like, you're this far from a fire department, takes them longer to get there, so your risk is higher. So that's how you were coming up with those numbers. And that seems, it does seem a fair way to go about how you come up with the numbers. This does not seem like a rich versus poor thing at all. I mean, you're treating everybody in the district equally, but but the process that you use to vote does seem to be based on good use of the information that you have, and a way to be equitable to everyone in the district. I'd like to
Chair, I would just suggest, I'm not sure if your chief has a presentation, but I think after you hear from the public, open the public comments, close public comments, and then you can go back for further board discussion and potential action if that's what the board desires. But that would be my recommendation.
I have follow-up questions. Sorry. Okay. So I got a little lost with the $1 one vote assessment and figure out what your vote is. And is this clear on your ballot? I'll just ask one question at a time. Is it clear on your ballot to the person voting yes or no what their vote is going to be?
Great question. Yeah, in fact, Prop 218 requires that the notice describes how the tabulation happens. So think of that notice as like a little book, a little voter's book, and there's a whole section that is how the votes are tabulated, that explains, probably better than I explained here tonight, but explains very clearly how the weighting works. And that's actually required by Jarvis required that right in Prop 218. That
So
clarity.
where's the audit trail? Where's the proprietary stuff, parameter or formula you're using? Is it intellectual property? Where are you using that formula? Are you hooking up into the third party computers to use it?
So again, the formulas, and that's a good way to describe that we use to determine, technically we're calculating for each parcel how much special benefit. And the assessment is then the dollar amounts of that special benefit. Those formulas aren't proprietary. They're actually clearly spelled out right in the engineer's report. That's one of the principal requirements of the engineer's report. So that those are spelled out. Now, I would be not being completely forthright if I told you we didn't use a computer to calculate, even on a small district like yours. We would use a spreadsheet to calculate actually how much, or a database to calculate each of the assessments based on the 4 factors we talked about, in addition to the size, the acreage. So it's really kind of a formula with 5 things. But anytime you could say, oh, well, this particular parcel is $272.27. You could then open up the engineer's report and you could say it's 12 acres. It's a timber with 2 houses on it. You could open up the engineer's report and it would take you a couple of minutes, but you could write in there, it would teach you how to calculate that assessment, and you would be able to calculate the 272.27. We don't do each one by hand. We do have a computer that does it, but I think it's clear. But I appreciate this question. It is to the crux of the matter, and I may not be explaining it very well, but we do use computers to calculate, but it's all kind of set out there. And those are formulas that it's a requirement. In fact, the engineer's report describes how we came up with those formulas. And you should, I think you said you had CSA 48. And so we describe, why is this an important factor? How did we come up with this? You know, we have tranches for different factors for distance from the fire station. And why do we have those tranches? It's usually based on some sort of study. We make a reference to that study and we kind of explain how we came that up. Now, we are certainly not beyond reproach, and people can say that, I don't like that formula, that I don't like that approach. But we as engineers, we develop the approach, we put our stamp on it, our license, and Edric and I are both licensed civil engineers. We put our license at risk when we stamp it, and we think it's the state of the art. And I will tell you, we see the way we do it show up in the engineer's report of our competitors. We see legal cases where they refer and they say, this is a better way to do it, and they describe it our way. So I can say fairly boldly, we're the state of the art in California, how we do it. We're detailed and we're rigorous. But if you do decide to go forward, I am happy to sit with you and just go formula by formula and show you how we do it. I can't really do that tonight. We haven't developed the formulas yet, but you guys need, as a board, your responsibility is to really understand this. And so we would be happy to work with you to make sure you understand.
Okay. At this point in time, I'd like to open the floor to the public for comments.
Chair, I'm gonna go in the order that I saw their hands raised. So I'll start off with Ms. Becky. You've been asked to be unmuted.
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I am part of CSA 48, and I went through that process that SCI did, and it was not, in my opinion, it was not good. The process was always changing. The evaluations were always changing. Parcels that were a fraction of an acre were charged at a full acre, rounding up every time, even if it was 0.1 of an acre. Some properties adjacent would be taxed at a lower rate, others and their neighbor would be taxed at a higher rate when the properties were exactly the same. The appeal process was terrible. There was no appeal process, and there still is not. I think that I strongly recommend that your community get a second bid and get another company to look at your community. And I really think that you need to get a feasibility for the consolidation itself done first. The thing about this is that with the CSA 48, only 25% of the property owners voted. People didn't know what it was. I observed people did not know what it was. They thought they were voting for something else. They even sent a check for their property tax bill. So 25% of the people voting is not very good, but the reason we're seeing so many small fire agencies using this is because it has a 50% plus one vote to approve it, and that is a weighted vote. It doesn't take the customary 66%, 2/3 vote to approve a new tax. It's easier to get a yes vote, and that's why we're seeing it. I take exception that SCI would have no conflict of interest in tallying things. Of course they do. They want to have that 95% success rate. So I want to tell you that it is against California Government Code 50078.2b for properties within the state responsibility area, which is everything on the mountainside of Soquel Drive, from being assessed using a special benefit assessment. There also needs to be made clear the special benefit versus the general benefit. And a lot of Branciforte Fire's calls are to general benefit for car wrecks on Branciforte Drive. I'm out of time probably, but I just think this is premature. At least get another bid on this thing. Thank you.
Any more comments from the public?
Yes, sir. Give me 1 second. I have someone named Adina. You've been asked to be unmuted. Adina, you've been asked.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm working with the technology. Thank you. It took me a moment. Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. My name is Dr. Adina Shore, and I just want to say that I'm not against doing what it takes to keep as many fully operational fire departments as possible in the state of California. And particularly, my concern is my neighborhood, of course. But what I'm not understanding is why fire protection is becoming a socioeconomic issue. I know you said that that's not the case, but it very clearly is. I mean, raising taxes, people having to pay extra taxes in order to have basic protection, which seems to be a basic right of being a citizen. I thought that was the primary purpose of our government, was safety. But why are we being taxed with the cost to our basic right to fire protection? I have, like many of my neighbors, reached out to Newsom asking why surplus funds are not being allocated to maintain local fire stations, to no response. It is clear that without the backing of an organization, and I have even reached out to LAFCO, Branciforte Fire Department as an organization, someone on our behalf to reach out to Newsom to get his ear, because we're not receiving any responses from him as individuals. How can we petition for funding to finally get BFD fully staffed, equipped, and trained in the same medical procedures as Scotts Valley? It seems unarguable that it is dangerous to have a fire department that is not staffed to address any given emergency. And it's critical to provide all that Branciforte Fire Department needs to have it fully operational in every capacity, even if it becomes an auxiliary to Scotts Valley Fire Department. More fully operational fire departments in more locations is unquestionably what the state of California needs, not less. This should not even be a conversation. So why do we not focus our attention on finding funding through grants, changing the law to allow for our already excessive taxes to be allocated for full fire protection before other questionable and less important or life or death programs? We need fire protection and emergency services more than any other programs. We should not allow for only wealthy or financially drained families to receive the protection that every American citizen deserves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Madam. We got 2 more hands raised, Chair. Give me 1 second. Ms. Marilyn, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Hi, thank you. First, with all due respect to Ms. Steinbrunner, someone from the community actually needs to speak, and we need to understand what the community wants. I would like to hear about the survey results and what the community is thinking on this issue. The last speaker may bring up some excellent points, but again, I would remind people that we have an immediate problem that must be solved within a year or so. And you know, petitioning to change the way taxes are handled and funds are dispersed from the state and other organizations will not solve our problem. We need to act on this. We need to act now. And I would urge the board to vote. SCI, as far as I know, is a perfectly reputable company. They have a good results that other people are not dissatisfied, as Ms. Steinbrunner is. I think we should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Larry, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Sure, thank you. I would echo what the previous speaker just announced and believe we should proceed with approving the study. I want to know what the costs would actually be. And I appreciate the approach of Prop 218 that reflects the differences between parcels. An undeveloped parcel next to me may pay much less than mine with a house on it. I think this is the appropriate way to go. I would like to see the board take action tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair, there's a couple more, so just bear with me while I
Go right ahead.
get them. Terry Kay, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Yes, I just have one question regarding SCI's presentation regarding the, oh, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, good, okay. About the weighted amount for each parcel, and one was a risk factor regarding how close your home is to the fire station. Would that just be Bransett 40 fire station? Because I mean, I'm people that are more in the outskirts, like I'm not that far from Scotts Valley fire station either. I just wondered if all that's taken into consideration, or you're just referring to how close you are to Bransett 40 fire station. But that's a question. So it's more of a comment because I think this is just for comments, and that is all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Terry.
I was wondering if that could be addressed as far as I do understand that other fire stations, it is a consideration when you're figuring out the risk of how soon any fire district can get to your property. So it's not just Bransett 40 that works into the equation. Just want to make sure if that's correct.
And again, we don't know the details, but we do consider all of those. I know in CSA 48, there's some CAL FIRE stations, and then there's some seasonal stations. And so it can get complicated. And I appreciate the member of the public, I think her name's Terry, the comment in question. And my answer tonight is that we would take a look at it. I don't know how it would all play out, but we would take a look at that. And we're really trying to individually and uniquely look at each parcel and determine the special benefit it gets from fire protection services. There's issues of mutual aid and all of that stuff. So it's all a consideration.
Chair, we have two more members of the public that want to speak. So I'm going to ask Dale to unmute themselves.
Good evening. My name is Dale Thurston. I've lived in the Happy Valley area for 42 years. Let me first start out with thanking Pete Veneris for bringing this issue back to the board so they can have this discussion and hopefully move forward, making the right decision. I'm a member of the Resident Advisory Committee, along with several of other folks who've spoken tonight. And we've all worked very diligently over the last year trying to figure out what our financial situation is. And I've heard some of our people talking recently about, let's change some of the funding. Those things take time, like Marilyn said. We don't have time. We're in a dire situation. We only have about a year's left before we run out of funds and go bankrupt. We've looked at the income, we've looked at the funding models. We know that the tax rates are basically the same throughout the county. It's really, the tax rate is the same, but the tax base is different because many of the other areas have a lot more development. We don't have it, and that's our biggest problem. We've worked on the issues trying to identify what to do. There are some of the options. We've looked at all of the issues that we're dealing with quick medical response, and that's what our constituents have always said. We want medical response coverage, and that's our biggest issue because our population is aging. We also want to make sure that there are responses for our elementary school that's quick. And if it's from Scotts Valley, you can add at least another 10 minutes to every response. We've talked through some of the issues dealing with the fire insurance with the state and how it impacts our residents. We've also talked to the state dealing with the insurance commissioner's issues, trying to find plans and options for all of us. We found that as a small district around the state, there are many in the same situation and they rely on volunteers. We don't have that luxury because we don't have that many volunteers to fill like we have in years past. Yes, we have Measure T as an option, and yes, we could look at additional funding that way. The best option if we were to merge appears to be with Scotts Valley. So it's the most logical option that we have at this moment.
1 minute left.
But Scotts Valley doesn't have an extra pot of money sitting around to augment the additional staff that would be needed to man our station if we were to man by the national standards that are set for fire stations. Therefore, we've been looking at extra money and trying to find ways to fund our station. If we want to fund our station, we need to come up with the additional monies through other methods. This process that we're looking at with this Proposition 218 funding seems to be the most logical, but we could also, again, go back to Proposition T and look at how we can do that if we wanted to. The main thing is we need to know what the number is that we need to come up with, and that's what the study will provide us. From there, we can make some rational decisions as to how we go forward, and that would come back to the board. The board has seen many emails from our community, letters, and the postcard response, I believe the Chief Lackey is going to talk about tonight. People have been sending in. Many of us in the committee have been asking questions, talking to our neighbors, trying to get all the input we can. We're looking at how we can keep it open.
You want to wrap up really quick?
Okay. For over 26 years, I have worked in the public sector and I've sat on many public boards. This appears to be a no-brainer when I look at this decision tonight because number one, the funding for the study is already in our current budget. Number two, your action tonight does not impose any additional assessment on anyone. Number three, your action tonight only authorizes a study that our community wants to see and wants to have the number from. Therefore, a unanimous vote to do the benefit study is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. We have more public comment.
Yes, sir. We got two more. Give me
Okay.
1 second. We have Don Jarvis. You've been asked to be unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate the presentation by Mr. Bliss. Just a couple of comments and maybe suggestions about a little bit more information. And John, you said that the board has several bites at the apple as the process plays out. There are several decision points where the board can stop the process or continue the process on to the next step. So maybe a little bit more about the role of the board in this. Like, at what point does the board see the actual list of all the parcels and the proposed assessments? And I almost envision, reams of computer printout paper that they can go through line by line before they authorize the ballots to go out. how are appeals handled, or questions, before you get to the actual balloting about, oh, well, this parcel actually has some hidden dwelling units that nobody knows about. How is that handled? And then also, there's been talk in the past about exemptions, like senior exemptions, or typically in property taxes, there are exemptions for public facilities and churches and those kinds of things. So what are the exemptions? How would those be handled? And mostly back to if the board decides to go forward with the next step, which is hiring SCI to do this study, that's not the end of the board's role. What additional points does the board have to take action before it gets to the actual balloting? And then I almost think I heard you say that even if everybody votes yes, the board can still decide not to impose the assessment. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Don. And
I would ask the board chair, would you like me to respond or hold, or?
Well, since you have the answer on the tip of your tongue, John, if you can just respond quickly before we go to our last member of the public.
Sure, great. Hi, Don. Good to see you. Thank you for those questions. And so let me try to be as brief as I can. So there's 3 big formal bites at the apple. One of them I would say is tonight, or if you decide to go through with the study. One of them is the vote that accepts the study and sends the ballot. And you are right. The third one is if the results are in support, you have to vote to approve them. Now, I want to be real clear on that. If the votes are in support and the assessment is approved, we don't know of a single case where a board didn't go forward. So that's kind of a rubber stamp. So that may not really count. So, but in between that, the way we work, and we work closely with staff, and the relationship between the staff, and we would always recommend you set up a committee to kind of oversee. At any time, if you're uncomfortable with our work or want to stop us at any time, we just stop and we would charge you what we had done. We don't chase down because we signed some contract or something. So you can actually stop any way along there. One of the things you said is about reams of paper, and that's actually not too inaccurate. There's an engineer's report that would actually have a levy roll. It's required to have a levy roll. And so the parcels, and I think you have a 900 or however parcels you have, those would all be, and so you can individually look at those and review them and compare, that kind of thing. You gave a good question about appeals. And so as soon as the engineer's report becomes a public document, it will have the levy roll, and property owners or anyone can come through and say, hey, that parcel, that doesn't seem right, or I'd like you to take a look at this one. There's actually a couple extra homes, and we work, it's a dynamic situation. And so we're always updating and improving the data. Even when the ballots go out, and Jarvis hasn't written this down, but people that work for Jarvis have told me, part of the 45 days is it is implicit that there may be people that provide additional information. And so they provide additional information. There's 2 houses there instead of 1, or one of the houses burned down. We get that a lot, unfortunately, that the county records show a single family house, but there isn't one there anymore. And so we would adjust it. And if it's during the ballot, we will issue a revised ballot. And then after the balloting has happened, and even when the assessment bills go out, it's a fairly straightforward process. Our phone number is on the property tax bill. Any property owner can call, and we would evaluate it, and if there's an adjustment due, we would issue a refund to them and correct it for the following year. We would be in constant conversation with the chief to make sure there's not any additional information. So appeals, we would say the appeal process is efficient and effective, and we want to get it right. And we know the county records are imperfect, and you've got lots of parcels with tree cover, so that research becomes more and more important. Then you talked about exemptions. And so typically, we don't see a lot of exemptions on benefit assessment. You see them on school bonds and school taxes. Senior exemptions are almost on every school bond or school tax. It's rare on assessments like that. There is one legal case actually in Southern California where they had a number of exemptions. They actually had a nonprofit exemption if you're a nonprofit, and that was upheld by the courts. So if that was something that was interesting to you, that you'd like some research, we would be happy to look into it. We would review it with counsel to see if they're comfortable with it. So to be clear, there aren't a lot of exemptions. We don't see that with assessments very often, but if it's something that the district said, hey, we want to get some advice or consider that, we'd be happy to research and look at it.
Thank you. And Chair, we have one more request from the public. Zachary, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Yeah, hello. My name is Zachary Rainey. Somebody mentioned that they wanted someone to talk from the community. My parents moved here in 1969. I attended Happy Valley School, and I support Pat O'Connell and Chief Lackey. I went to school with Jerry Gwine, who was a captain at the station, and Dale Thomas. So I go way back in the Valley, and I think SEI, running a study, I think, is probably one of the smartest things we could probably do. I think having more heads together on this in the Valley and having people that kind of, seem like you really do know kind of your business and what you're talking about. It seems to me that this comes down to the bottom line, and it always kind of does come down to the bottom line. And my support is behind Bransford Fire Department and whatever they decide to do as far as bringing on whoever they think is competent to help out this valley. It's very important, of course, that we all have our own protection and fire care. But as we've been seeing in the valley, growing up here as a child, it used to rain a lot here. We would see 90 inches to maybe 100 inches a year, where it rained 30 to 40 days on end when I was a child. Fire danger, somebody mentioned that a lot of the calls are car accidents and things like that, and people maybe slipping in their houses. But eventually, we are going to start seeing some type of wildland fire activity in this area. If you walk my property, and I live directly across the school on the top of the mountain, there's burned out fire stumps everywhere. So a fire has moved through this area at one time. So I definitely think that we as a community should get behind this study and try and figure out what it is that is best for all of us to participate in this. And I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Lackey and to Pat O'Connell and everybody for having these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Zach.
Chair, there are no other requests to address the board at this time.
Okay, I'd like to turn this back over to Chief Lackey to share his thoughts with the group.
And Chief, I know you have a short presentation, but it would be great to hear about the survey results. One of the members of the public asked, what was the consensus of the community, at least the ones that submitted their responses?
Yeah, I'm going to make, that's going to be part of my presentation here. So we've been talking about this benefit assessment for several months now, and it's hasn't gone. And it's time that we make a final decision, because as the future goes, we're going to run out of time, and we need to, if we're going to do this survey, it's going to take time, and we're going to need to get this done. So, we've sent out the mailer. A number of board members requested we sent out a mailer to get the citizens of the district's input. We sent out 700 postcards to the actual property owners. And with the 700, we received 146 responses. So out of that 146 of those responses, we had 125 say that they want to move forward with the benefit assessment study. They want to know what it's going to cost. 23 out of the 146 said they didn't want to move forward with this. As the fire chief, I work for the board, but I also work for the residents of this district. And I really think if the people of the district at least want to see what the cost is, we should move forward with this assessment and at least get them an idea what it's going to cost. And again, there's several points in this process that the board can step in and say, yeah, this isn't going to work, or let's keep moving forward. So that's my spiel on this. And I look forward to moving forward with this.
Okay,
I have a comment, please.
okay.
Yeah, everybody's asking about the secret cost. That's all the emails I got. I want to know the cost. I want to know the cost. Well, you know, the checkbox reads, survey question, should Branson 40 Fire District approve $50,000 study to determine the amount of each parcel owner would be assessed subject to a vote by a parcel owner at a later date to keep the fire station open? I didn't vote on this, by the way, so you don't have a no from me. But you know, if I didn't know any more than that, I'd go, yeah, I want the fire station to stay open. Let's see what the assessment is. Yeah. Okay. Well, my contention is that what I wrote this out really quickly, so bear with me. This is my short, well, I should preface this that I did talk to Joe. I did talk to the chief at Scotts Valley, really great talks. I thought I said to Joe that I wanted, if this was going to go forward, you'd have to explain everything. Like we're finally getting a lot more stuff. I'm still not clear on an audit trail. I'm unclear about the proprietary stuff. I'm unclear about the appeals. Yeah, there's lots still, but I asked for detailed pages, and there also was a member of the public in a previous meeting asked for more than just one little sentence, which most people would check. Well, you know, I would check it if I didn't know all this other stuff. But just for fun, I made my little survey paragraph here, you know, in lieu of that. Okay. Survey checkbox, yes or no. According to LAFCO and consultants, $1 million is needed for 3 more full-time firefighters, or Scottsville will shutter the BFD station. Therefore, an average benchmark assessment for a single-family equivalent unit, which is from Mr. Bliss's CSA 48 reading, which is a unit, which is a single family on a small lot, not with a whole lot of extra land or other parameters that he discussed. It's quite simple math. It's around $1,700 tax increase on that parcel. That's a huge tax increase. That's more than the Hollywood Hills pays. I keep saying this. We're going to get fleeced. Anyway, then I said the final vote for approval is based on a weighted vote, meaning a neighbor with a property assessment, with a larger property assessment, would get more votes. You know, and in the end, the votes, it's unclear. I just threw this in there. I still unclear on this. The votes are tallied with some kind of proprietary formula. Okay, I guess maybe I'm wrong there, but I from what I've read in the CSA report and from my experience talking to other people that are familiar. Okay, so check the box, yes or no. You know, if you sent that out, it would have been a little more fair. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. No more further comments from the public. Hold on just a second. No more
Adam, we
further
move back
comments
to the
from the
board now,
public.
or where are we at?
No more further comments for the public. I would like to just, in relation to public input, I did receive 22 emails over the past several days, all in support of us voting for the resolution tonight. And one person who sent one, I would like to read it just before we do it done, because I think it represents a lot of what I've heard. Dear Pat, my husband John and I, as well as numerous neighbors, feel extremely vulnerable during fire season and during heavy rains that knock down trees onto power lines. In emergency, Scotts Valley Fire Department is quite a distance from us. Those are extra minutes during a fire or medical emergency can make a difference. I was a teacher at Happy Valley School for years and I love this community. This is my forever home and I've always counted on the protection from our fire department. When I found out that B40 might close, I seriously thought about moving. This would be heartbreaking to me because the people of Happy Valley feel like family to me. We are just asking you to do the survey so we can see if it is financially feasible or not to keep our beloved fire station open. The majority of people I have spoken to with are very concerned about losing B40 Fire District and want to find out. I hope you will support us by allowing the survey to take place. Thank you for your time. Flo Mizell. So at this point in time, I would ask for a motion.
Before that, Pat, I've been away. Oh, first, John, that was a very good presentation. Appreciate that.
Okay.
But since legal addressed us, I've been weighing in heavily on what he had to say. And I feel I need to remove myself from any vote, that there's no suspicion of a conflict of interest because of my family business. Most people, probably only Chief would know that Santa Vita, at least back in 2016, was the second highest payer on Measure T. I don't know where to interject on that. Anyways, that's going on.
Pete, I did look on some rules about what you just asked to do to recuse yourself. However, you're supposed to let the board know before the meeting to do that. You can ask Mr. Blair if that's the case or not, but in one of the sections on board responsibilities and actions, that was in the rules. So Mr. Clare, can you clarify that at all?
Yeah, let me check. Yeah, if that's in the bylaws, that's in the bylaws. I'd have to double check the bylaws, but assuming you have it there, I'll take your word for it, but I'll double check while you guys are going.
Pete, I just want to make sure we do this correctly.
Can I ask a question there, Pat?
Yeah.
All the emails I received that were in favor of doing a study seem to all come from a very small portion of the district and not spread out over the entire district. I saw no email responses from Jarvis Road, Vine Hill Road, Mountain View Road, Vine Hill Road, or Granite Creek, or Glen Canyon, Lower Branch 40 or Upper Branch 40. They're all concentrated in one particular area. Any way we can explain why that is that way?
I do think I did see some responses from other areas, and I do know
Majority came from a certain particular portion of the county of our district.
I'm just saying, I did hear a lot over this past weekend, attending the Redwood fundraiser event for Happy Valley School, where there was almost everybody would come up and want to know what's happening. And their concern for the fire department, particularly the superintendent of the school, all the times that they've come to the district, they would hate to see that change where it would be an extended time for somebody to get to the school for emergencies. So I did hear from some folks up in the Jarvis area that were also concerned. So it may be that I don't think there was anything odd about the letters that you got, because I do think they represent the input that I've been getting from those in the district.
Chair O'Connell, I'd like to go over a flow chart here of what's going to happen after tonight's meeting. And I think Joe can get it up there for me. So tonight, if the benefit assessment's not voted to go forward, there's not going to be a study for the vote. And as of now, because Scotts Valley cannot staff the station with the funds that they have, the station will close. They've made that clear that they don't have the excess funds to staff the station with 2 people. Okay, if the board does vote yes to at least start the assessment, the study, they'll begin the study. The board will receive a draft of the study, and they can vote on then whether to stop moving forward or not. Again, then the board makes edits to that study. Again, the board has total control over what's going on. And then if the board agrees on the final study, then they call for a vote for a mail-in election, right? So, and correct me if I'm wrong, John. And then once the votes are tallied and they're all tabulated in an open session where everybody can see them, then after that, the board still gets to vote on it, whether we move forward. So these are the options for tonight.
And Nate, so if we go to start the study, is there a cost of the start of the study, or is that been calculated yet?
No, the study is actually broken into, I believe, three phases for cost. The study itself, I believe, is around $28,000, and that includes the benefit assessment and all the numbers of what it's going to cost. Each single resident will get a ballot with the cost it's going to cost them, so they will know exactly.
At the $28,000 level?
Correct.
Each individual property will get an assessment of what it's going to cost them prior
Correct.
to continuing.
Is that correct, John?
I think, I don't have the proposal in front of me, but the study will identify as part of that study that 28,000, and we're working with you along the ways, and we're coming up with preliminary costs. And so someone said, what if the costs are way high? We can stop at that point, but at least, so we don't necessarily need to finish the study. It's not like on the last sentence, we're going to figure out all the costs. We're working with you on that study, and that will have the levy. The balloting costs, and help me out, Chief Lackey, if you have the proposal in front of you. Typically we have it as there's a balloting cost, and the balloting task would include the that's when the mail goes out, and I apologize, I can pull it up as well.
So at the $28,000 level, we will have an answer of what it's going to cost per parcel.
Correct.
Okay.
So I got some emails too.
Chief, this is Director Dodds. I'd like a chance to weigh in for a bit. I've been having difficulty staying completely online this evening, but I wanted to reaffirm also the variety of emails that I received this week, and a number of them from the area of Branch 40 where I live, residents, neighbors, both verbally in discussion, but also on email, reaffirming their desire to conduct the study as part of the democratic process of them having a say in how we move forward from this point. And I wanted to assure all of those residents that emailed me, I will vote yes on this. In addition, when we're looking at the cost of $50,000, if we choose to not support this study, what are you going to do with that $50,000? It's budgeted now, but in a year, all of what we have reverts to Scotts Valley. What is the wisdom in trying to protect $50,000 here in this case when so much is on the line? John, I appreciate your time coming and sharing with us this evening. And I look forward to taking this to the next step. That is all. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Director O'Connell.
So I got some comments. I got some good emails. I just received two tonight saying, please don't vote for the study. And I mean, we all voted for the study, and now we got all this information and anxiety and everything, and I don't know what's going on. And now we got some kind of, I don't know, veiled threat or something from our own lawyer to one of our people that voted against this in the beginning. I mean, Pete is the most honest person. He's looking at the whole picture. He knows about the weighted vote. He knows that it's not fair. Other people that I don't want to name that are really close to this process said it's not fair. I also got kudos on Nextdoor, like 2 or 3 kudos. So now, yeah, I agree. I agree with Kurt. It's coming from one area, all this malarkey. And, you know, the other thing is, I'm sorry, all these, you know, wanting to know what I've been telling you over and over that Don Jarvis already told everybody what it's going to be. And I read right from the CSA report what that single family unit is going to be. So it's going to be substantial. And the poor people in this, I had some comments to send back to a lot of the emailers that Kurt was referring to. And I said, the reasons for my voting against the study on July 28th, which the measure lost 3-2. Scotts Valley and LAFCO is trying to say the station is only for Happy Valley and will not benefit Scotts Valley at all. That's not what I heard in the second meeting, by the way, if you're listening closely, but it wasn't recorded. It's too bad. According to LAFCO, October 13th, 2021 review report, Scotts Valley Fire Department gets an average of 2,021 calls a year, and Brits 40 Fire gets only 202. Now that, you know, I think that's really high. I think our chief said he was queried about that. It was like 130 last time, or 40 or something. Therefore, now this is a letter I sent back to everybody, which I didn't get any response to except one, and I sent it to about a dozen people. According to LAFCO, okay, I read that. Calls, they get, okay, we get 202 calls a year. Therefore, it's common sense that Scotts Valley Fire Department will spread the calls more evenly for better use and management of personnel and equipment between all stations. Therefore, thereby dispatching Brits 40 Fire staffed station resources to many Scotts Valley, some Scotts Valley Fire Department physical location calls. They'll spread the calls out. Therefore, it's common sense that Scotts Valley Fire Department will keep or eventually reopen, if they close it for a while, the Brits 40 station. I also got that from really good sources that I'm not ready to talk about. The special benefit weighted vote, it greatly biases the outcome for people that have a lot of money. This is not going to be a cheap tax, and most people still don't know what's coming their way. I know you're trying to tempt the board here with ideas that we can stop things, but these all have to be like in writing ahead of time. And I disagree about the exemption thing. I thought we had a rebate process and we could define it as a board for special people that couldn't afford such an outrageous amount of tax increase. before the annexation, I might say. So this is a letter. In all likelihood, after the annexation, Scotts Valley Fire Department can have their own special benefits assessment, making the cost much more affordable for poorer Happy Valley property owners on fixed incomes. I also believe that that Scotts Valley has millions in revenues. I don't know exactly, because they have standard revenues and then they have investment revenues. So, but they have like 4 million anyway in reserves. They have 4 to 5 staff firemen already in each Scotts Valley station, 2 to 3 more firefighters, more than LAFCO's minimum requirement. And that Scotts Valley Fire Department could easily move personnel around with a much smaller additional cost, I believe. Don't forget, they get all of Branciforte's land, buildings, 1.7 in surplus revenues and equipment, plus over 1 million a year in property taxes from Happy Valley residents. I'm almost done. I only got one reply. I sent this to 12 people. I will also comment that another LAFCO conclusion was Branciforte District would get a superior level of service, which I agree with, from just the 2 existing Scotts Valley stations. They're arriving 40% of the time, according to their report now, when we had their captains with us and we had their chief running the operation at Scotts Valley, at Branciforte. So they say we're going to get a superior service from the existing Scotts Valley fire stations now without even charging. You know, it's going to be, you know, Don Jarvis's number. It's going to be around, for the single family unit, around $1,700 for each property owner, probably minimal. This tax has already, and we got the CPI coming in every year too, and you know what it ran today. Boy, you better have something like holding that CPI back these days. That's the consumer price index, how this tax would go up. This tax is already roughly calculated. The tax was already roughly calculated September 15th at the open public meeting by Don Jarvis, the LAFCO consultant. And so also, Scotts Valley residents pay nothing extra for their present fire services. To reassure people, if there is a fire, all location agencies, like Kirk was saying, we got 3 of them really close to us, are under contract to respond immediately. So, you know, the wildfire thing, I mean, I've been around a little while. There's a lot. I mean, there's CAL FIRE flying overhead, Central's here, you know, within the same, almost the same period that we get there. And so all I'm saying is that I sent this to everybody that just said, I want to know the cost. I want to know the cost. I want to know the cost. I got one response to it back. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Director Landon, you said the same thing about, anyway, how you think that Scotts Valley will, you know, change the way it's figured out. And you posted about the benefits tax. And she had said that, she responded back to you, said, if it was as simple as dividing the 1 million by 700 parcels, we wouldn't need to spend 50,000 on a benefit office. Rather, the audit will determine each parcel's benefit to having the station open. Thus, the parcels closer to the station will pay more than those of us farther out. This was explained at length at Happy Valley meeting. She also says, I emailed Chief Whittle about this, and that was that they would, your contention that they'll open the station eventually and do it a different way. She said she emailed Chief Whittle about this, and his answer was no, that isn't going to happen. You've taken this statement out of context. Adam Shore was asking him, Chief Whittle, if an analysis could be done that the cost of is 1 million, but that the value to Scotts Valley ratios could have some benefits and thus lower the cost. He did not say yes, that is true, and the cost would be reserved. Yes. So again, that came from the Jarvis Road area.
Chair, I think at this point, I think really good discussion by all the board members about this. And I think at this point, you may want to entertain a motion just so that we can have further discussion if need be.
Okay, can we entertain a motion to approve the vote?
To approve hiring SEI Consulting for a benefit study.
For
So
hiring,
Director Dodds, I move that we approve the motion to hire SEI for the benefit study.
You're out of motion. It has to be one of the abstaining people that was quoted by your lawyer in the last meeting. It would have to be me, Kurt, or Pete to bring that motion to the floor. And the motion would be more accurately that we think about another vote. That's from your lawyer.
I would defer to the legal counsel. My understanding is we needed one of the three board members that voted against to bring it back. And now that it's back, now any board member can entertain a motion, but I would defer to the legal counsel.
No, I think we'll need one of the members who voted against to either make the motion or to at least second it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
okay. If there's no motion,
And I'll get clarification from legal counsel again. If there is no motion, then that means there's no action on hiring, and that's it. We move on. In essence, it's an unofficial no vote. But again, I'll defer to your legal counsel.
Yes, yeah. That's what it would be.
Can I make a motion to proceed forward to the $28,000 level that they stated that would give the amount to the taxpayers of what their increase in taxes would be? And that's it.
so we have a motion by Director Meyer to proceed on this study up to a certain point. I guess we'll have to get that number put into there to the certain point where we'll know the assessment value to each property, and then make a decision at that time.
Chair, we should probably hear from Mr. Bliss if that is acceptable to the current proposal to amend it in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's how we work. You can stop at any point. It's the motion that I've heard is clear to us and is acceptable to us. If you want to put those types of limitations, that's routinely done. We're comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you. And then, legal counsel, would we need to bring the motion back up and then amend the original motion?
No, so we'll take this as a new motion. It's the same agenda item, but since nobody made the first motion or the motion for reconsideration, I think we'd just take this as a new motion.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion. Can we ask someone to second the motion?
I have a comment.
That
We can't make a motion on this when it's not detailed out. For instance, the process that Joe reviewed at the public meeting was that we would have to require SCI in writing to have this sort of condition, such as even to have the review by the board again after all the assessments come in, and we get to go over them and say nay or yay again at that point. It looks like, I don't know, I guess Kurt is thinking that we can stop it or vote there. We have to put this in writing into requirements of with SCI. That's it.
Mr. Bliss, can you comment on that?
Sure. I'm not an attorney, but I think our contract is straightforward, and I think common sense, reasonable and rational interpretation of any contract, if we enter into a contract, that we get paid for the work we've done, and you can stop us at any time. The motion, as I understand, is quite clear. It's that you would go through the task, that first task, that 28,000. And again, I'm representing verbally on record, being recorded. You can stop us before that. It's clear to go there. There's no expectations we would have beyond that. I'm happy to sign anything right now. I'm happy, but verbally, I agree with that. I don't think there's any risk. This is routinely done. I don't, in my professional experience, I would respectfully disagree with Board Member Landon. I don't think it requires a amendment to the contract. You're just putting some limitations on the tasks within a very clear, simple contract. And I would also represent, if you decide to go forward, we send you a proposal. The next step is an agreement, and we can provide that clarity in the agreement that Board Member Landon would like to provide those protections. And I can represent that to you verbally right now. If you want me to sign something, I'm not going to drive over there. I live in Oakland, but I'm happy to do whatever to give you that comfort.
And I'll just jump in as district's legal counsel without going into the nuts and bolts of contract law. I'm comfortable with the district approving the contract, whether we frame it as an amendment or what. The board's vote will speak for itself in the meeting minutes, and that authorization is enough to move forward.
Nick, can I offer that we can send out a newsletter upon this information coming back to the board, to the public landowners, stating what it is going to be at that time, a postcard similar to what they got before?
Are you addressing me, Kurt?
No, it's Nick Claire.
Oh yeah, I mean, so we're not going to be making any motions on that now, but if you want to provide that general direction to staff.
If we pass this as such, can we make it that we have to send out some kind of a newsletter to the community saying what their taxes are going to be increased at this time before we go forward with any further in the study at that time?
So just to make sure I understand, so you would want the motion to be approving the RFP up to the $28,000.
Once we understand what the actual tax increase to the property owners is, we send out an additional newsletter to the entire community and get their input one more time before we go forward with it.
Okay, so that would be a newsletter that goes out after the work is done at whatever that 28,000. Do I have that in right?
When we get the numbers.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think you're spot on, Director Meyer. That's something that your chief and LAFCO will definitely advocate, is once we have those preliminary numbers, we're not only going to send out that newsletter that you're recommending, but we'll also host workshops where we can discuss those numbers and answer questions. Again, do everything we can to outreach. So I think that's a great idea, and we'll definitely do that if this study is approved tonight.
Thank you.
I believe we need a second now.
Correct. We have a motion by Director Meyer, but we do need a second before we can do a roll call vote.
I'll second.
Second by Chair O'Connell. And I don't want to speak on your behalf, Chair, but that's ready for Chief Lackey to do a roll call vote.
Okay.
Okay. Director Vanners?
No.
A no vote or?
That would be correct. Yeah, no.
Okay. Director Dodds?
Yes.
Director Meyer?
Yes.
Director O'Connell?
Yes.
Director Landon?
No.
Okay.
The
Okay.
motion passes 3-2.
Yep.
Motion passes 3-2.
What are you talking about? It was 2-2.
It's 3-2.
How's it
Director
3-2?
Meyer voted yes. Director Dodds voted yes. Director O'Connell voted yes. You voted no. Pete voted no.
Wow.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
7.1.
now we move along to item 7.1, is the chief's operational update.
All right, so it's been a busy month. Continue to work with LAFCO and on the consolidation and moving forward with that. The drawings for the at bay repair on the station have been submitted to the county. As we all know, that'll probably be a while. They've been there for almost 4 weeks now, and I'm assuming there'll be some changes after we get those back. So that's still moving forward. Had a meeting with a property owner on Jarvis Road regarding a hydrant location. I did a sprinkler final up on Granite Ridge Road and a hydrant and tank inspection on Granite Creek Road. And then went to a fire chiefs meeting at Central Fire, the monthly meeting with Central Fire or with fire chiefs. And that's all I have.
Okay. Has there been any written communications to request the board on this item only?
No.
Chair, you do have one request from the public to address the board on this item.
Okay.
Mr. Zachary, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Yeah, I'm just sitting back, just kind of watching and listening and taking this all in. Once again, I just want to express my support and my gratitude that this vote did pass to 3-2. And also, I don't really know board member Landon very well, but I'm super curious, what is your solution to this situation, rather than always just kind of playing the other side? I don't think you need to comment now if you're on the line, but just maybe ponder on that and think about it at one time, because I mean we're all trying to move this forward and make sure that everybody in the valley is protected and everybody has the proper fire protection and paramedic protection and all that. So that's it. I just wanted to jump in there one more time, guys.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay.
Chair, I don't see any. Oh, I do see one more request to address the board.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Ms. Becky, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Hello, this is Becky Steinbruner. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I'm on telephone, so again, I can never know for sure, but want to make sure that we are connecting. I'm unclear. Are we are we having public comment on the fire chief's operational update or a comment on the previous item? Can you help me with that?
Yes, just quickly, we're on 7.1, which is the fire chief's operational update.
All right, thank you. I was confused by the previous speaker's comment actually on the previous item. And I did just send an email to the full board repeating some questions that I had asked and points I had made in my testimony that were never discussed in your deliberation that I think are quite significant, including a legal one. So I'm happy that the chief is going out and doing these things, especially up in the upper Jarvis area. I am hopeful that the chief is working with the fire-wise communities there. I think I did hear something about a meeting. The Central Fire Protection District has just completed a training for the fire-wise leaders within Central Fire District, training us to be the home ignition zone consultants is the word I'm using, to go out to our neighbors upon invitation and talk with them about what they can do to reduce the home ignition zone 0 to 5 feet out, which will become a law effective January 1st, 2023. So I hope that you are working with the fire-wise people there and that they are very aware of that new law coming through. I think it's a good model to include the neighbors as not as the heavy-handed law enforcement, but I'm aware of some problem properties in your community, and I'm hopeful that those can be addressed either with the Firewise home ignition zone consultants or with you with a more heavy-handed enforcement method. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. McKay.
Okay.
Chair, there are no other requests to address the board at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Nate, for your presentation. And 7.2 is the reorganization process. I think we're kind of done a lot of that today, but can you make a presentation?
We haven't met with the ad hoc committee recently. Joe, do you have anything else we can add to this?
Yeah, just briefly, the Branson 40 Fires Resident Advisory Committee did meet a week or two ago. They did write an official letter to the board, which was sent to the board members, and it's also available on the district's website for any members of the public that want to read it. And again, they were just encouraging the board to consider hiring SCI. But as your chair mentioned, the Joint Ad Hoc Committee group, which comprises representatives from Scotts Valley Fire, Branson 40 Fire, and LAFCO, haven't met recently because we were waiting to see what the results were going to be for the fire station and whether or not the board was going to approve a study. That would really determine our next steps in our discussion points. And now that we know that the board has decided to hire SEI, at least to a certain extent, just to get the preliminary numbers, that gives us enough to have more discussion points with the group to talk about, all right, now that we know that study's going to be working on, what else do we need to accomplish as that way our workload is in parallel with that study. And one of your members of the public, I think it was Miss Becky, that mentioned about a kind of a plan or analysis on the level of services. That's exactly what this Joint Ad Hoc Committee group is going to conduct. We're going to develop that study. That way the Branson 40 community can see, here's your current level of service, and here's your level of service if you get merged with Scotts Valley Fire without the fire station open, and here's what your services will be if you are merged with Scotts Valley Fire with the Branson Fire Station open. That way it's clear information for the residents to see. That way that when we reach the point of approving the reorganization, the residents will have all the information they need to whether to support or not. But again, that's something that the Joint Ad Hoc Committee group will be meeting very soon. Now that we know what the board's action was tonight, I'm going to schedule a meeting with those representatives in the coming weeks. And that's a quick update, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we've addressed everything on our agenda. I could ask for a motion to close the meeting.
Chair, you have one more, the 7.3 staff reports. That's something that.
Oh, excuse me.
Yes, and I do see a hand raised from the public. So
Okay.
I'm gonna ask them to unmute themselves. Ms. Becky, you've been asked to be unmuted.
Oh, thank you. I was quickly trying to get in before the meeting was adjourned because I also want to point out regarding correspondence, I sent a number of pieces of correspondence to the Branson 40 Fire Board that were not included in the written correspondence. Only one was, but there were others, and I did resend those others to Chief Lackey and to Chair O'Connell. So I want to ask that all correspondence that I have sent be included in the on the website so that people see that it was pertinent to issues that you discussed tonight, but not included in the packet or on the website before. And I also want to point out that there's been no real answer or discussion about the AP Triton consultant analysis and how that will include the Branciforte Fire and Scotts Valley Fire consolidation. I'm a little bit alarmed, actually, to hear that that level of information would be coming from the ad hoc committee. That is a high level, detailed piece of information that needs to be done by a third party. So I hope that the AP Triton analysis will be coming soon, and that will guide the district's residents in their decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Becky. Chair and Chief Lackey, I know you want to get to 7.3, but I'll just quickly answer Ms. Becky's question of, yes, LAFCO hired AP Triton to analyze the current sphere boundaries for the 13 fire agencies in Santa Cruz County. So we're going to be looking at all the spheres and see whether or not annexations may happen in the near future, or if there's any opportunities or obstacles when it comes to their spheres. Branciforte and Scotts Valley Fire have a combined sphere. There are little portions that include CSA 48, so that's what the AP Triton study is going to focus on the sphere boundaries. You mentioned a comprehensive feasibility study that you saw with the Centro and Aptos La Selva fire consolidation. State law requires a feasibility study when there's a consolidation, when two fire districts merge to become one. In this case, with Branciforte Fire and Scotts Valley Fire, it's an annexation. In LAFCO's terminology, it's actually a reorganization. So Branciforte Fire would be dissolved, and the dissolved area would be subsequently annexed into Scotts Valley Fire. There's no requirement for a feasibility study. That being said, the law does require that a plan for service document be completed, which is another way of calling it a transition plan. And that's the obligation of the applicant. One thing that LAFCO is doing, instead of just having Branciforte Fire, having their chief develop this plan for service, we think it would be a good government for Scotts Valley Fire and LAFCO to help produce this comprehensive plan for service. That way it is very detailed, and not only does it comply with LAFCO law, but it adds a lot of information for the public to see the transition from Branciforte to Scotts Valley and all the intricacies that's involved. And Chair, Chief, with that, if you want to quickly go over.
I have a reorganization question too. Joe?
Sure.
Since we have Mr. Bliss here, I have one question for him. How can voters easily know by looking at their ballot what their weighted vote is?
Director Lannon, I will note that John Bliss and his colleague are no longer on. It's been a long meeting, so I know they.
What a surprise. Okay, thank you.
But we'll table that question and we'll follow up with you after we speak with John, because I think that's a valid question.
Don't you know? Does anybody know? I mean, he kind of talked about it for a while. Does anybody have the slightest idea how he said that the vote was? I mean, does anybody take a guess? Somebody on the board.
Well, I believe he's going to sit down with the whole board at some point and go over all that with you.
Chair, do you want to go with, Chief, do you want to go with the 7.3?
Yeah, staff reports. In front of you, you should have the month's staff reports, staffing reports, incident reports, and monthly apparatus report. As you can see, you're still staffed with 2 people every day for the month, and occasionally we have a third person here volunteering their time. And if you have any questions.
Thank you for and to all the volunteers and staff who've helped keep that staffing level up at that level. Again, it was never acceptable to have just one operating, and it's much better to have the 2 consistently, and that's why we adjusted to be able to do that. So And it's even better when you got three, and that's quite often. So good to see.
Chair, this item doesn't require any action, so you can move forward to the next item, which is correspondence.
Okay, correspondence.
All right, in front of you, you should have an email from Kim Dudley urging the board to approve the benefits study. An email from John Benito, I believe, voting yes on the benefit assessment study. An email from Roberta and Mark Joyner, request for approval of the benefit assessment. And then an email from Ms. Becky Steinbrunner, what if the fire board votes to halt the merger? You should all have those in front of you.
And I will send you all of the messages that I got on my department email that you can put them in as requested as part of the board or the minutes.
Yep. And that's all I have.
Okay. Is there a
Chair?
motion now to adjourn?
I'll just mention, I don't see any
Oh,
comments to address the board. We do have, we do have a closed session, so the meeting continues.
yes.
I'll defer to your chief on that.
So we're moving into closed session to talk about labor negotiations with the Professional Firefighters Association. So can you set us up in a separate room, Joe, so that we can do that, and then we'll return back?
I was not aware that you needed separate rooms. Chief, is there a way that you could have a conference call separately because I don't know if the webinar will allow separate rooms at this point.
I don't know how they could do that.
Yeah, because I don't have the capabilities to do a separate rooms at this time. I apologize.
We can maybe we can have a little meeting of the board members that's separate from this to go over the negotiations. At this point, it's really just a discussion of that we've met with them and we're proceeding. So there's not really much to talk about right now. But there is another meeting planned soon. That's just kind of the update. Nick, do you have any comments?
Yeah, if you can't do it now, you could always do a special meeting, 24-hour notice and just have the closed session on the agenda. You'd still go in the open session, then closed session, then come back out if you wanted to do that. Yeah, but otherwise you're kind of stuck tonight.
Okay.
Which I don't mind.
All right, we'll try to get that to happen. Thank you.
Chair, you do have one request from the member of the public to address the board.
Okay.
Ms. Becky, you've been unmuted. You've been asked to be unmuted.
Thank you. This is Becky Steinbrunner. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Very much. I have a question about the correspondence. Since many pieces of correspondence that I sent to the board were not included, what is the policy? If that could be made clear on the website. I thought I did everything the same, but only one made it in. So what is the policy for sending correspondence to the board to ensure that it is included in the agenda packet?
Well, I'm not sure, but I know some of those were already addressed in a meeting before and were put in before. So, but
all correspondence should be included regardless of whether it's been addressed or not. Isn't that correct via the Brown Act?
So we'll check and see. I thought that they had been included previously.
No, they had not. They actually were dated the same as the one that was included. So I would appreciate it if you would look into that a bit and put the clear policy on the website. especially as there will be more correspondence coming to your board regarding the action you've taken tonight. And Chair O'Connell, I appreciate you offering to put all emails that you've received regarding this on the website in the minutes, and I hope that the other directors will also. My final comment regards closed session, and I think it is required that you state who would be in closed session. Will you have attorneys there? Will you have labor negotiators? It's required that you at least state who would be in the closed session. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Becky. Chair, there are no other requests to address the board at this time.
Now, can we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Motion.
There we go.
Motion by Director Meyer, second by
Director Dodds, second.
Director Dodds. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Approved by all members. Thank all of you for attending tonight. And keep attending. Thank you.